their headphones, so you can hear me. I think it's okay. Testing to see you can hear? Okay, perfect, great. I think you guys up front can hear me, and you only need to put on your headphones when you're listening for questions from the audience. So welcome, good afternoon. My name is Marcine Mitchell, and I'm the Senior Vice President for Climate Change at the World Wildlife Fund. And WWF is one of the managing partners for the America's All In initiative. And we have had 3 great days of events here at the America's All In Action Center. It's been really invigorating and fun, and I guess having a feeling of being hopeful after listening to all the things that people and our colleagues are doing in terms of keeping us active and committed to climate action. And this topic of Trailblazers, Changemakers, and Innovators about women and climate leaders is obviously close to my heart. We have a great panel here to talk about why they have chosen to dedicate their careers to climate and what they've had to do to rise up the ladder in climate, to become a climate leader. Obviously, I've been working in climate for over 20 years, so this is very relevant for me, and I know how hard it is. As it stands now, less than 40% of climate leaders identify are women, so we have a ways to go. And it is really important, of course, because we have huge challenges in climate ahead. And we know from many studies that women tend to be more collaborative, where we work together, we're broader thinkers, and so we have a lot to add to this movement. Nationally, we can work on bringing folks together in terms of regulations, policies that we need to do. Locally, we're really close to our families and our communities. I mean, we're the ones at the PTAs, and we're the ones with, the children and other things that we really understand what the community needs and how we can move on climate action. And even internationally, right, we represent a really diverse perspective in terms of our nations, our communities, and our homes. So women leaders are very, very important. So I'm really looking forward to hearing about the stories of our climate leaders here. And without further ado, I want to turn it over to Taryn Finnessy, who is the Managing Director of the U.S. Climate Alliance. And we're so happy to partner with you on this. And welcome, Taryn.
Thank you, Marcine. I may be a little bit biased here, but this is my favorite event at COP, and I haven't been able to be here in person the last 2 years, so I'm very excited to be here in person to do it this year. We try every year to shine a light on some of the amazing women leading within the climate space. And I want to bring up our panelists here in a second to really talk about what we like to call badass women. We affectionately refer to this as our Badass Women's Panel every year when we're planning, and just think it's really important to highlight how we got here and our path, because it's a little bit different. So without further ado, I will bring up our panelists. Maryland Secretary of Environment Serena McElwain. Blytheville, Arkansas Mayor Melissa Logan. And Microsoft General Manager of Sustainability Policy, Michelle Patron. You can hear, okay? Okay. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. All right, so we have a lot to talk about in a short period of time because we want to hear as much as we can about each and every one of you. So let's jump right in. So I'm going to start with you, Secretary McElwain. You are Maryland's first Black Environment Secretary and just the 3rd woman to be confirmed by the State Senate for your position. Can you tell us more about your career path and what inspired you inspired your state climate policy work?
Want me to take yours?
You can take this one. Either one.
Well, hello, everyone, and so happy to be here and have this conversation. So my career is not traditional. I started off in the federal sector, federal government, for a state about 31 years. And about 2/3 of the way in my career, I started noticing, oh, well, let me stop for a second. While I was in the federal government, the first 2/3 time frame of my career, I just wanted to be a chief operating officer. That was my goal in college. I just wanted to run large organizations and, end up one day being a CEO and just managing operations. And so I went down that that path, and I thought I was going to leave the federal government and go into private sector. But I ended up loving public sector. And so I continued running agencies and organizations as a chief operating officer. But then 2/3 pathway in my career, I started thinking about things differently. I started thinking about all that was happening in terms of climate change, the floods, the seasons changing. And I knew that all of these things that were happening were because of people like me, us. And I thought, I want to be a part of something that matters. And so I started switching at that point. I did challenge myself and ask, is it too late to start, to go another direction? And I just answered my own question, which I challenge you all to do that. When you ask a question that may take you in a direction to not do what you want to do, just say, yes, I can do this. And that's what I did. And so I started going into energy policy. I went to work for the Department of Energy. I worked in fossil energy, and then I went to U.S. EPA in California. I worked at the region as Assistant Regional Administrator, and then I went to U.S. EPA headquarters, where we were talking more about countrywide, nationwide policies and issues. And after that, I became a political appointee at the California Environmental Protection Agency as the undersecretary. And then I was asked to be the secretary in Maryland's Department of Environment. And that's how my career just kind of morphed into climate policy. And the last thing I'll say is I always think back to when I was a little girl. And the story for me is I just remembered not having a lot of money, my family. And I always wondered why we were so much hotter, like burning up in my neighborhood. And the other neighborhoods, when I would walk down the street, it was cool. And really cool. It wasn't so hot. And as I got older, I realized, oh, they didn't invest any trees in our neighborhood. And so that's why a lot of the elderly people in my neighborhood was always sick. We were sick as kids. And so those kinds of things just made me realize I need to be at the table and a part of this and change.
Well, we're so glad to have you, and you have been an incredible leader and really the driver behind so much change, and excited to see what you still have to do in Maryland. Michelle, you've held a number of top roles in traditionally male-dominated spaces in both government and business. We'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey and how you've overcome some of these challenges in your career.
Thanks. Well, first of all, let me say how excited I am to be here. And while you guys are excited to organize it, it was the part of my agenda that I was looking forward to most. And you will also hear a lot of similarities in what we are going to be talking about, even though we've all had very different experiences, that there's no linear path. And a lot of this is because this is such a dynamic sector that is changing so fast that the jobs that you might be interested in don't exist when you are looking for them. And that's kind of been my career path. So I'm able to say it now looking back. At the time, I didn't realize it. But a lot of it started for me when I was growing up. So I grew up in South Florida, in Miami. And a lot of the Miami economy is really determined, in society, is really determined by the local environment around us. I was fortunate, when you take field trips we were able to go to the Everglades and learn about the Everglades and just see how much being on the water impacted or determined what the economy looked like. So that really is kind of the underbelly for me, what really drove my interest in the environment. And then when I was studying, I was able to study. I went to school, which might be dating myself, when some of the treaties that are being talked about were being negotiated. And I learned about the UNFCCC. I was in school at the time, and it was this, the Rio Summit, where all of the world governments came together to talk about environment and figure out what to do and actually negotiate the first climate change treaty. So I learned about things that worked, things that didn't work. And I said, you know what, this is amazing that countries can come together to be able to drive environmental progress on the thing that matters most to me. This is something I want to spend the rest of my life working on. So I didn't know what that looked like. I was fortunate enough, I went to go work for a non-government organization. It was a public sector legal organization that looked at this issue. So that's where I started, actually at an NGO. And then I went to go work, you'll see another similarity, at the Department of Energy. So early in my career, where I was able to work on government. And when I was there, I realized in the energy sector, it's a public, it's a public good, but a lot of the decisions are driven by the private sector. And so I left government and I actually worked in the private sector and energy commodities at the time. And I spent 10 years there. I was fortunate to go back to the government and to work in the White House and to work on climate policies at a critical time when the US government was negotiating the Paris Agreement, and then left and have spent the last 8 years putting all of that to work at a technology company that is helping both private sector, governments, civil society use technology to address climate change. So it's been not a linear path, and it's constantly been changing. And I would say that the things that I, looking back, have enabled me to be successful have been, one, resilience and adaptability. Things change in a daily capacity, they change internally, they change externally, and it's really important to figure out what skills you have, how you can constantly apply them to different aspects of your work. Early on, one of the skills that actually helped me most was language skills, because I was one of the only people at the Department of Energy who spoke English and Spanish, and the secretary at the time, Secretary Richardson, he liked to do his bilaterals in Spanish, and so none of his team could speak Spanish, but they wanted someone in there to be able to know what the United States was, discussing, so I was able to be in the room. And that actually goes to the second point, is sponsorship and opportunities. Sometimes they were directly from managers that I had, sometimes they were from people that were within the organization or outside the organization who, without me even knowing, were creating opportunities. They couldn't attend an event, and so they would suggest that I attend an event, or they couldn't they couldn't travel, or they saw a new opportunity and they created that for me. And I would sometimes say to myself, I can't do that. And they say, yeah, you can. Of course you can. And by even creating that opportunity and suggesting that I be the one to go, they were implicitly putting their confidence in me. And so now that's what I'm paying forward as a manager, as a leader, creating those kind of opportunities. And the last piece, just having that network of people outside to be able to bounce ideas off of, to know what is happening. Something I learned early on was how to negotiate for myself. And the only way that I was able to develop that kind of network of contacts, and they were both women and men, was by asking. I was scared to ask people, oh, well, I'm thinking of going for this job. How should I think about the compensation, or how is the compensation broken up, or what do you think is the right way, or I'm going to do this negotiation, how should I think about that? I guess now you might be able to use AI for that, in that kind of interaction, but being able to develop that kind of network to really support you throughout your career, that's been something that I've been able to draw a lot of impact and strength from.
Thank you so much. And I think that confidence piece is such an important piece, and it sometimes takes women a little bit longer to get there, right? We second guess ourselves, and I think that's a unique to females, having to learn how to have the confidence when they walk in there. Mayor Logan, you are the first woman and just the second African American to be elected mayor of Blytheville. So you too have been a trailblazer. I've read about your 16 plus years of service in the Army, and thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what led you to this stage today and how climate action and resilience have become some of your top priorities?
Yes, I am so honored to be here today. This experience has been very eye-opening. She told you that I was a military soldier for about 16 and a half years. So I traveled extensively, but I was on a different mission. And so the mission that I'm now on is to leave a legacy of climate resilience to the people who are going to come behind me. How did I get here? There is an organization that says She Changes Climate. I would like to further enhance it by saying she changes resilience. Women change the way we see resilience. I grew up in a little rural city in Arkansas, Blytheville. Came from a sharecroppers background. My grandparents were sharecroppers, which means that we farmed the land that we didn't own. We lived in a house that we did not own. And my parents, my mom is a Mississippi girl, and my dad is a native Arkansan. And I watched throughout my years the resiliency that was exhibited by the women just in my household. My grandmother, after my grandfather passed, had the responsibility of raising a family without an education or a job. Kind of hard. So that meant that her children had to become responsible for her at that point. And so working in cotton gins, working in cotton fields, even at the age of 12, I learned how to chop cotton. My mom went on to become an educator. She was the first college graduate in her school, in her family, out of 13 children. She attained a master's and then a PhD and went on to become a very phenomenal woman. And her hopes for me as a gifted child, I never wanted to be who I was because I wanted to dumb myself down because I didn't want anybody to think of me any different. I didn't want to be better than anyone. But truth of the matter is sometimes when you're called, your calling starts at a very young age. And so I realized that. And her aspirations were for me to become a doctor. Well, I worked as a child. I started at 12 in the cotton fields. Then as a teenager, I helped the elderly in my neighborhood. So service and public service has just been the heart and breath of who I am. I joined the military on a split option program when I was in the 11th grade. And so the summer of my senior year of high school, I met and fell in love with a young suitor and was going to be a wife and just continued the trajectory of being an Arkansan, raising a healthy family. But the world wanted me to do more. And so through my military experience, just watching the women in command and having bosses who really saw a light in me and believed in me and encouraged me to finish a college degree and then to finish a master's degree. And now as a PhD, completer, I understood what my role was. I came back home after my tour of duty in Iraq. And I tried to retire because I was injured in Iraq. So I came home to raise a family and to retire. But public service kept calling my name. So I started, early on as just a campaign manager and an election coordinator to try to get the voice out among, people who looked like me who didn't believe in the process of an electoral, process. And so just getting out the vote, knocking on doors. And then there was a higher calling. And so the mayor of the city, I ran his campaign, and he said, you know what? You're being underutilized and underserved. I need you to come and work for me. For 2 years, the mayor chased me. And I said, no, I came home to retire, to raise my family. Just please leave me alone and let me be a volunteer and part-time so I can work when I want to. Well, he didn't let it rest. And so we are in the process of rebuilding a city that has been burdened by the veil of lack, by the veil of disparity, and by the veil of not being invited to the table. And so when you're in a city that's 75% African American, and we're already counted out because Arkansas is considered lowest in education, lowest in food security, and lowest in economic sufficiency, you have to have a way out. And so I think that I'm a trailblazer offering other women a way out. So why am I here at COP? Because MRCTI, the organization that sponsors all the cities along the Mississippi River, said, Melissa, the river is important to your city. It's your commerce. It's your revenue. 1.5 million people are employed along this river. It's where you deploy your corn and your soybeans and your rice and your cotton and your steel. You have to get involved with the climate. We have to protect the Mississippi River. So I'm a fighter. I'm a trained soldier. So guess what? I'm just being deployed in a different way. I have joined the Army of Climate Action, and so I am here to attain the rank of general. And I hope that while I'm fighting, that I'll bring other women along with me.
And now you know why we call it the Badass Women's Panel. So, Michelle, I'm going to come back to you. The private sector has played a really critical role in the last 4 years in the U.S. and getting us to where we are with our climate goals. And the tech industry in particular is going to play a really important role across the board, but particularly in our electricity sector in the coming decade. How are you and your team at Microsoft continuing to meaningfully move the needle in this next administration?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to follow that because I feel like talking about electricity at Microsoft is a little bit, but I will say that, you know, all of us are speaking to the challenges and opportunities that we face in our roles and we face in our organizations. And for Microsoft, you know, the reason that electricity is important to us is that we build data centers that provide digital services to our customers. They provide that to our corporate customers in all different sectors, in finance, in steel, in industrial, in energy, to governments, both at the city level, state level, national level, and to civil society, including NGOs and international organizations. And the more that those organizations want to use digital tools, they need data centers to power that. So that's where our electricity demand comes from. So it's an economic engine. And this is not something that's new for us. It's something we've known for a while. That's why we set 5 years ago in January 2020 really bold goals to be carbon negative by 2030. That means we're going to reduce the emissions of our electricity, of our direct emissions, and then we're to near zero, and then we're going to get our supply chain to half and remove the rest. We also set goals on water and on waste and on ecosystem because they're really important. And a key part of meeting those goals is the purchase of carbon-free electricity. So when we build a data center, we commit to bringing new carbon-free electricity online. So if it's in Virginia, if it's in Illinois, if it's in Arizona, in Wisconsin, we are bringing new solar, new wind, new storage to the grid. That's going to continue. That's part of our business. It's what we do across the United States. It's what we do around the world. And just to give you a sense of scale, we've done to date over 120 of those projects. It accounts to about 34 gigawatts of carbon-free electricity. We also see our role as a first mover. And I see other corporates in the room, and we've been so fortunate to partner with other first movers, other corporates in the tech sector, in the industrial sector, and across the board in the United States. And the same type of first mover that we've brought to renewables, we are now bringing to other carbon-free technologies, because one of the things that we're learning as electricity demand for us grows and as electricity demand for other sectors grow to power the US economy, we need to make sure that that electricity is available all the time so that it's not just, you know, clean, but it's firm. So 100% of the time it'll be there. So in storage, in geothermal, in advanced nuclear. So those are things that we continue. We work at the local level, we work at the state level, and we work at the federal level to do that. You mentioned steel, and so I do want to point out that we partner closely. One of the exciting things that we've done this year has been partnering with one of our tech peers, Google, and one of our steel partners, Nucor, and pooling 500 megawatts of electricity together to bring new carbon-free electricity, new types of carbon-free electricity to the grid. They have a certain emissions profile, a certain technology maturity, but these things that are happening in the lab, being able to really catalyze and almost move faster than government to bring this forward. So all of that ingenuity, all of that innovation will continue to move forward. We're a US company with global operations. We're used to political change. It happens everywhere in the world that we operate. So we just stay our course with our business strategy, and that's what our sustainability is grounded in.
Thank you so much. Mayor Logan, I'm going to move to you. We're living in polarizing times, and you're governing in a state where opposition to climate action remains strong. How do you go about building consensus and bridging some of the divides that are necessary to advance climate solutions?
Again, I'll say that my city has become a part of Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, and they have signed in under the Paris Agreement, and they have a portion of the Paris Agreement that's called CHAMP, actually calling for high ambition, multi-level, partnership. And so, as a city, I'm on the lowest level. And so, how do I turn over a state that's against climate change? Well, eventually, they won't be able to deny it because of the tornadic activity. My city sits directly on the New Madrid Fault, which is an earthquake fault. And so slowly we're changing our building codes and things of that nature locally to meet, resistant standards. And we just started a circularity program locally in my city. And so as that tumbleweed effect takes, place across the state, I think that we'll be able to convince even our local and state government that becoming a part of this climate, action is going to be the best move for the future. It's something else. I'm really not sure how many people they actually, boots on the ground, were able to interview. I know that the disparity is that one-to-one connection that we no longer have because of technology. And I think the more that we knock on doors and bring people to the table, you will see that we're not too far from 100% coming in to participate in climate action in the state of Arkansas.
Well, we will be ready when the mayor of Arkansas, or when the governor of Arkansas is ready to join the U.S. Climate Alliance. Secretary McElwain, you joined us last year around this time, and a lot has happened since then. What are some of the biggest wins that you've had this last year, and what are some of your priorities for the months and years ahead? And if you could speak a little bit to how your state's engagement with the U.S. Climate Alliance can help you accelerate in that work.
All right. Yes, I was here not here, but at COP28, and I learned so much there, by the way. It was just really awesome being there. But a lot has changed in Maryland since that time. When I left here in November, the next month in December 23, my agency had just published the first climate pollution reduction plan. We had aggressive goals, 60% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions by 2031. It's like, how are you going to do that? That is literally impossible. Not impossible, but it seemed to be impossible. So we came up with this climate pollution reduction plan, and we did modeling and economic analysis to see how do you actually do that. And in the plan, it demonstrated that there was a lot that we had to do. First, we needed to publish or push out and implement 42 new and current policies. 6 of them were new policies. Now, we already had a lot on the books that we needed to push out, so 6 more, and we needed to enhance some of the policies that we already had on the books in order to meet those goals. So I was thinking, oh my God, how are we going to do this? And then another part of that plan says you also need $1 billion to finance per year for 6 years to finance all that you need to do to meet your goals. And so, again, I found myself in this position of, well, in Maryland, we don't just have $1 billion sitting aside to use for climate. So what are we going to do? So since then, we have brought in over $600 million for the first year, the first $1 billion, and it just kind of sat on my lap. I didn't do much to get it. Just things started lining up. So, for example, we have a cap and trade program in Maryland, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We usually bring in a certain amount. For some reason, the stars were aligned, and we brought in a historic amount in that 1 year. I'm like, wow, this is great. Another thing that happened is we brought in about $300 million from the Renewable Portfolio Standard because, unfortunately, companies decided to pay the alternative fee because they weren't able to meet the goals. Now, that's not a good thing for us. but it was nice getting the money. And so that added to the money that we had. And we were also very fortunate enough to win a $130 million grant from the US EPA. And so, of course, we're using that money to do lots of things, to help communities, to help with solar projects. So it's been a financial happy time for us in Maryland. And just last, some of the other things that were good wins for us, back a year ago, we had about 82,000 EVs that were registered. Not a lot, because we have 6 million cars on the roads. And so since then, we've gone from 80 million to 130. So, not million, 80,000 to 130,000 EVs registered in Maryland. That is a win for us. So we're just moving forward. Very happy that, you know, we've done so much. You ask about the Climate Alliance and how that's helping. We're part of the Climate Alliance, thank goodness, because that's how we're able to come together with all the subnationals and learn from each other. And since that time, the Climate Alliance brought us all together, all 24 subnationals, and we decided, you know, we need to really decarbonize the building sector. So we all signed, all the governors, we signed a letter, and we all committed to 20 million heat pumps to be deployed across the country in our 24 states. That is a win, and that's helping us.
Well, thank you. Your story about finding the money to make it happen just reminds me that sometimes we live into our ambition, and if we set our ambition too low, we also live into that. And so you should aim high, and I think it was Krista McAuliffe said, if you shoot for the moon, the worst that will happen is you'll come up with a handful of stars. And so it reminds me that we should all be ambitious in our goals. So this one is to all of you, so you can choose where you start and pass the mic along. But you know, climate impacts are being felt across America, and I know some of us were talking about this even before the panel. So I'd love if each of you can talk a little bit about what you're seeing on the ground, and in your communities and in your companies, and what some of your adaptation strategies and investments are to address that.
So for Microsoft, adaptation and resilience is really at the core of our business, because we need to make sure that our data centers and our services are running 99.999% of the time. So it's fundamental at the start of an investment to understand what is happening, and to make sure that we're able to operate and the local communities are able to operate, because what good is having our assets operate if the local community can. And one thing that we do, in addition to getting carbon-free electricity for our data centers, is making sure that we are putting more water back in than we are taking, and looking at kind of ways to reduce our water footprint. And a lot of that work really involves engaging with local stakeholders, with the basin, other basin key stakeholders, to make sure that they both have the water that they need and there's water in the future, but also being able to respond when there are crises. Another important way, another important tool that Microsoft has when it comes to adaptation and resilience is AI. And really being able to get a better sense of what is on the ground and what is potential to change by looking at flood models, extreme heat models, and laying up that on top of it. This is not something that's new to Microsoft. We talk about it a lot now because there's been advances in generative AI. But one of the first ways that we started doing it was this program called AI for Earth in 2017. And one of the first projects where we used artificial intelligence to get a better map was actually the Chesapeake. to really get a really granular understanding of what was happening over time and what interventions at that time it was an NGO called the Chesapeake Conservancy could take to really protect the watershed and make sure that it will continue to provide welfare for the communities surrounding it. So there's lots of different ways. It's front of mind for the business, and it's also opportunities for us to use digital tools with communities to protect their local community.
I love that, and I love that it's so core to what you are doing.
To piggyback off of what Ms. Michelle has said, as a part of MRCTI, what we've experienced on the river are just record drought, and then we experienced some flooding. But in the past 3 years, in the area down the Mississippi, we are in a third-year drought, which has resulted in about $24 million of losses just in the last 3 years. And so we have started with MRCTI to look for private partnerships. And in the recent year, we've signed on with Ducks Unlimited. And Ducks Unlimited has partnered with MRCTI to deploy 100,000 acres of wetland so that we can set up a healthy system of aid for the river. So in times of drought, it will release water, and in times of heavy rain, it would help us prevent flooding in our local areas by absorbing some of the waters. And I'm here with a colleague, Mayor Hollis Winston of Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, and what he has done is deploy one of the largest solar projects along the Mississippi River. His entire city government is operated by solar. And so in Arkansas, we're going to a more solar model, trying to kind of push out some of this carbon emitting energy sources. And so we've just deployed in recent months about 3,000 acres around the city. And so that's going to help structure us to be in the game when it comes to sustainability for years to come. So MRCTI is an organization of about 105 mayors who are looking for a plan, and we're bipartisan. We're a bipartisan group of people who are coming up with ideas to help sustain every sister city on the Mississippi River so that river, who is responsible for feeding 1 in 12 on the earth, can stay flowing, can continue its route, and continue carrying that commodity up and down the river to the rest of the world.
We're seeing a lot of changes, climate changes in Maryland every day. Communities are feeling it. There's no denying it. Climate change is real. When I came to Maryland from California, I'm from Maryland, so I was in California for 9 years, and I came back home. And because I was gone for so long, I was used to all the snow, the cold winters and the hot summers. And so I went out and bought all these coats, like huge coats, and getting ready for the snow. And I get back to Maryland right in winter. I didn't see any snow. And I thought, well, where did the snow go? So that's just another example of climate change. Snow was very minimum. I don't even think it was an inch. And I've never seen that when I lived back home in Maryland. Summers are hotter. And one other example I'll give is I had a meeting in Ocean City, Maryland. And my staff was telling me, well, when you go there, wear some boots because it's really wet. And I thought, we haven't had rain. How is it wet? We hadn't seen rain that day in probably a month. So I thought, what do you mean it's wet? Is it going to rain today? No. So anyway, I go on, didn't wear my boots. I thought, these folks are crazy. I get to the meeting, sure enough, the town was underwater, literally. And I just remember getting out of the car and just seeing all this. The water was about this high. And everyone's walking through the water because, believe it or not, the event was outside. And so I started asking my folks, my staff, why is this town underwater? What is going on? Sea level rise, right? Issues, flooding. And so apparently that community stays underwater. And it's just another example that this is real. So what some of the things that we're doing, we're really looking at nature-based solutions, right? And so we have a 5 million tree initiative. We're working hard to do that. We've made a lot of progress. I have my person here, my senior climate advisor, who's really pushing to make sure we meet those goals. We need trees. We need more trees to capture carbon and do all the wonderful things that nature has to offer for us when you plant a lot of trees. The other thing that we're doing and that we are prioritizing is living shorelines. We want to make sure that we're protecting wetlands, right? Our carbon-rich wetlands. And so we're also, with the living shorelines, we have a lot of communities, coastal communities, and so we want to protect them. And so those are just two examples of some of the nature-based things that we're investing in and really working hard to do things to protect our communities in Maryland.
You know, I think all of you talked about communities and people in your responses, and I think that that's so important to center people around the work that we're doing. So I'm curious, what are some of the ways that you hope to continue to center not just people, but equity, environmental justice, and a just economic transition in your climate work?
So at Microsoft, we think about how we can integrate that into everything that we're doing. And I'll give you a few examples of that in sustainability. The first, I talked about the purchasing that we're doing on carbon-free electricity. Well, in the United States, there's a lot of places that don't have access to renewable energy. They're underserved. And they also aren't able to benefit from the energy projects that take place. And so we have identified different portfolios of our demand to meet through projects in underserved communities. So because when we look at carbon-free energy, we're trying to bring that onto the grids where we operate. They don't have to be located exactly next to our facility, but they can be located in the grid. So we've done a number of partnerships with organizations like Volt and Soul System and Pivot, where we put 500 megawatts, and they kind of break that up into smaller projects where they then look for communities. There's been one project that was done in Illinois, another that was done in Mississippi, where the project happens in those communities. They also get a share of the project, so 10% of the proceeds go to the local communities, and they determine what they want to do with that, with the proceeds. It's a certain set of activities. It could be reskilling, it could be environmental mediation, could be environmental sustainable development. So that's one way that we're bringing that into what we do in the United States. And now we've been taking those learnings and increasingly applying that overseas. So we just did a similar set of projects in India. In all of the carbon removal work we do, if it's in nature-based solutions or in technical, some of the more technical engineering, direct air capture, as well as the water replenishment, and our Climate Innovation Fund. We have $1 billion that we invest in startups to take projects from the lab to the market. A core principle in each of those is environmental justice and equity. So making sure that that crosses the threshold so the projects that we do don't cause harm and are able to benefit the local community. The last piece I want to talk about is skilling and just how important skilling is. LinkedIn puts out a global skills report every year, and they just released theirs last week. And one of the findings is that obviously, more and more jobs in the future are going to require at least one sustainability skill. And what we see is that the gap is widening between women and men who have at least one sustainability skill. And so you'll see that 17% of men, this is global, across the LinkedIn network, have at least one sustainability skill, but only 10% of women do. And so focusing our skilling on both closing that gap and also in communities that have been underserved to be able to have more and more access to sustainability skills, to digital schools at all levels of the economy so that they're able to enter and to be part of the workforce.
On the local level, I think the most important piece here is education. Educating the community. And so in my local city, we had been without any type of circularity program since pre-pandemic times. And most recently, partnering with Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative and Replenish, we have established a circularity program where we're starting back this recycling, giving cash for cans. And I know it sounds really simple, but when you have no model to start somewhere and to make the individual as young as, toddler age responsible for what am I going to do with this plastic bottle? Or what am I going to do with this aluminum can, and actually establishing that right in their neighborhoods. So we didn't put it out on a county road or out on an interstate. We put it right in their neighborhoods. And there's small circularity centers throughout the city. And so that makes each neighborhood responsible for what happens in their environment. And we have started to plant trees. We have trees, but we're planting more. And so we're going for more green spaces in my local city.
Yeah, in Maryland, we are determined to make sure that no one is left behind in the green transition. And so we're focusing a lot on communities, disadvantaged communities, low-income communities, all communities. And so I know the federal government, at least right now, there's a Justice 40 where you have to spend 40% of federal funds on your programs. In Maryland, we spend way more than 40 on our programs. Also, with the Cap and Invest, Cap and Trade program that we have in Maryland, most of that money goes back to low-income residents. We help with offsetting their utility bills. And so we use a lot of the money we have to push back into those communities. One example I have is when I first started, I knew that we had a lot of money for water infrastructure in communities. And the first thing I noticed, maybe week 2, I asked, well, who's getting all of the money we have? And I was told, we disperse it out. We have a whole criterion that we use, and then we give money out to people who rise to the top. And I said, oh, that's great. How many of those who have risen to the top are in disadvantaged communities? He says, well, first, Secretary, it's not us. They don't apply for the money. Okay. And so what are we doing to make sure they are aware of the money and they are applying for the money? They were doing a little outreach. I ratcheted up 100%. Now more money is going to those communities. You have to go out and give technical assistance and bring people to you. And so we also do it in a way that when we have our regulations and we're pushing regulations, a lot of times we have public hearings. Sometimes they do not show up. So what we're doing is going out more, saying, nope, you must come. This is happening. This is impacting your community. We want to hear from you. We've even extended the open periods for permits when we see that we don't have representation. And so those are just examples of ways that we're going to continue to make sure that we are deploying EVs and all clean, not just EVs, but infrastructure into those communities. We're pushing businesses to do more in those communities when we have a little clout to do that. So.
It's great to hear. I think it's so important to make sure that we are centering this in the work that we do, and if it's not happening by the very nature, then we need to rethink of how we're designing our programs and how do we make sure that everything that we have is really thinking through how do we lift one another up. So COP is amazing in that it brings together both seasoned leaders and young leaders together. And for better or worse, most of us up here are more on the seasoned side. But I'm curious if there is something that you can point to, or maybe it's just not just one thing, but a handful of things that you can point to, a useful tool, a strategy, a network that you've tapped to help get you to where you are. And what advice would you give to the next generation of women leaders?
Um, the, the advice that I would give to the next generation of women leaders is to stay engaged and to find a mentor. I'm a novice mayor. This is the second year of my first term. But I did not disengage. I actually engaged harder. Even sitting among friends here, it's networking and not being afraid to network. It's okay to say you don't know, and it's also okay to ask questions. And so my advice to any young and aspiring female leader is to find at least one woman that you can emulate and engage with. And don't be afraid. If they don't say yes the first time, engage again. Eventually, you'll wear them down like I'm going to do the secretary over here. You will wear them down, and so much so that Michelle is going to come to Arkansas and talk to us about a Microsoft corporation in the city of Blytheville. I believe it's coming. Don't you believe it? Can't you see it? Can't y'all see it? We all see it, Michelle. So that's how you start things. You engage and you get involved. And it's not just about empowering yourself. You speak into the lives of the people that you're aspiring to be. You tell them how wonderful they are. You tell them how innovative they're being. And then you say you cannot save that knowledge for yourself. You have to pass it along. And so that would be my advice for the next generation of leaders.
I wanted to say +1, I know, right? I mean, be curious. And the worst that can happen is someone says no. That's it. That is the worst thing that can happen. Exactly. So, well, or it doesn't say it in a nice way, maybe, but that's it, right? Just keep putting yourself out there. I thought maybe I would actually share what I'm drawing strength from among young women. So, I have a middle school daughter, and about 2 weeks ago, she said, "Mom, I've been working on something in geography. I didn't want to tell you because I know you'd make a big deal out of it, but I just want to share with you what I've just learned." And my teacher is actually teaching us about COP, and I've been assigned the Philippines. And so here's what I've learned about the Philippines. And here's what can I just test out my speech on you? Don't give me any more facts, but just test out. And I was like, wow, how incredible. So it's just being curious, empowering yourself, and just the career path is not linear. I come back to that because there's just always so many opportunities when you least expect it.
I'm afraid to go now. What can I possibly say? Well, I'll tell you. One thing for me, I speak with female leaders all the time, young ones in particular. And I often get the question that you're always in these rooms where it's not many females, and certainly not many female black people in the roles that I have. And I tell them, I didn't notice. I don't pay attention. I just do what I need to do. I don't need to worry about who's next door to me, how they look, how they smell, what kind of hair they have. I could care less. I just command what I need, what I want, and I get done. Because if you start focusing on those things, you miss moving forward. I also tell them that sometimes people say, well, do I have the right number of years of experience to do this? Do I need to do this first? I tell them, the door has been open. Just walk through it. Don't ask questions. If you feel that you can do it, just do it. Don't ask questions. And then the last advice I have is when you walk forward toward your career of greatness, the minute you stop to question yourself is when you literally, maybe not so much physically, turn around. And when you turn around that direction, you lost steps going forward. So just continue to move forward and know that you can do and be whatever you want, whenever you want to do it. And if you want to be in the environmental field, then you should align yourself with leaders who are in that field. There are lots of organizations that are available, networking, and the like. And so that's pretty much the advice that I give youngsters.
That was pretty darn good advice for being afraid to go. You know, I think back on my career and where I've come from, and I think the thing that got me to not being afraid and trusting my gut was finding a good mentor and finding someone who believed in me, who could believe in me in the moments that I questioned myself. And that's how I was able to find the opportunities. And now I tell young women, you know, you can have 1,000 reasons of why not. You only need one reason why. So find your why. Yeah. So I know we're nearing our time here, and I'm going to hand it back to Senior Vice President of Climate Change from WWF, Marcine Mitchell, in just a second. But as Marcine makes her way back up to the stage, can you please take another moment and help me thank our amazing panelists?
So everybody, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful getting to know these stories better, these women better, very inspiring and, you know, really helpful, I think, for everyone, male or woman, right? These are the things, this advice is the things that we all need to keep in mind. And again, making you very hopeful that we can find the solutions that we need and we can continue to move forward on this very, very important challenge in front of us. So thank you so much for coming. Really hope you enjoyed it. Hope you took something away from it. And we hope to see you later on. Thank you.